So to do the applique, you need to print your pattern out if you haven't got a printed pattern that I've done for you already. On these ones, they're bigger than the size of the A4 paper, so that I split them so that you need to join them. So if you're printing out from a PDF, you need to make sure you print out 100% so that it comes out at the exact size. If you're printing onto letter rather than A4, I try and make sure that I'm leaving enough space, so it should still print out even if you're printing on letter size, but you still need it at 100% of the original, not scaled to fit, otherwise you're going to be squishing it slightly to get it on. So what you need to do is either cut off one of them at the edge or fold it over like I've done, and then you just need to join it up. It doesn't really need to be terribly accurate, to be honest, and just sellotape that across, and then we can then work from tracing that. Let's get a piece of sellotape. Oops, immediately stuck it to the wrong piece. I need double-sided, sticky tape or whatnot for it to make a neat job, but there we go, like that. And then next you need some freezer paper. So with appliques, it does depend on what kind of fabric you're doing and how the templates are done. For mine, you don't need to reverse them. Okay, so I regularly see people where they've done mine the other way around, and I assume that's what they've done, is they've reversed it. Right, you need to find a pencil. Just a moment. Like so, and we're going to trace it. So freezer paper, it's matte on this side and it has a waxed surface on this one. And obviously you can use it for freezing stuff, but we're not going to. So take your freezer paper and lay it down so that the shiny side is down. And with your pencil, we're going to trace all of the thicker outlines. So there's these thin outlines which are to do with the embroidery, and there's these thick outlines which are the edges of the fabric that we want to cut. Now some of these are pretty small, so you're going to need to take your time when you're doing them. So when you trace, you can use a light box if you want, but personally I find the lines thick enough that I can see through it easy enough. When you trace, you want to try, I'm sure you can see as I'm doing it, to put your pencil line on just on the edge of the line that you're tracing. So because it's quite a thick line, if you're always going kind of on the inside, you're going to be making all your pieces that much smaller. So try and go towards the edge. It doesn't matter too much, but if it's on like the shape of the face, then you are going to change it a little if you go too far in. So just try and go around the edge. So I lay out mine all as a drawing rather than having the separate pieces kind of flying around like you see them. They're not all separately, because I think this helps show where they're all going to go together. So you just need to keep on going. So I shall continue on this, but I shan't bore you with a description across the whole way. So once you've got it all drawn out, like so, you just need to have a quick look, make sure you haven't missed anywhere. Which I can't see anything particularly. Right, so what I like to do next is work out, put a label on which sections go with which fabric. So I'm going to be making this up as I go along, but you want to take your grid. So in the pattern, if you haven't printed it off already, then it's a good idea to do it now. You want the list of all the applique fabrics, and we're going to look for all of the same ones. So I'm doing this as I'm going along. So I'm going to put a 1 for this fabric here, which is the brown, and then I'm just going to go through and say, right, well, this one would also be, that's also going to be that brown. This one is going to be a cream. This piece here is going down his legs, so that's all that brown. This one is the main body, so that's 2. And so if you kind of go through, so like this butterfly, I think I'm not sure what colour that is yet because I haven't decided, but you just go through, and then when you're cutting it apart, you can go, what other colours are number 3, so that you don't end up accidentally cutting out a butterfly in the middle of the scrap of yellow that you've got, and then realising you were supposed to cut a tulip or something else at the same time. So I just take the time to go through and write the number. So in the table it will say like A1, in this case A1 would be a kind of soft brown, A2 would be cream, and just go through and write a number in all of them. So and then we're going to reduce the number of mistakes that we're likely to make. Right, hopefully I've labelled everything there. Your numbers might end up slightly different just because I might, this one off here, I might make a mistake on it, so as I'm going along. Now, is it a 7 or a 9? Let's have a look. 7. Okay, but that's what you want to do. So corresponding, right? Okay. So next what we want to do is we want to try and divide this up a little bit and collect the same pieces together, so where we can. So I tend to have a pair of scissors that I use for this because you are cutting paper with material scissors. So I have just a cheap pair. I think these are like £4 scissors, and they do gradually blunt, and I just replace them. So that's not just a small pair of sharp scissors, and maybe not your very best super duper really expensive scissors. So just to start with, just do the easy bits. So like, you know, cut out these little butterflies, because that's and anything that's obviously separate. So on here, we'll just cut this off here because we don't need it together. So these are all different colours, so we'll just be separating them. See, and now you can see the advantage because we've got some idea of which ones these are supposed to be. So I'm just popping them. Oh, yeah, you can just see them now. Okay, so on here, we're going to have the fawn all as one. And we're going to come down here and we're just going to separate him from these leafy bits. So cut really accurately down his leg. Now, I quite often do this, but to make life a little easier for people, I hide difficult to sew things. So, so he's got no feet. And then we haven't got to worry about people getting the feet right. So that is piece 9, so that can go there. And then later on, we can just tuck his ankles behind these leaves, and it just makes it all a little easier. So let's just remove some of this excess along here, and we'll see where we can divide it up a little more. So it makes it easier if we can, because then when we've got these spaces here, we haven't got to try and cut holes out in the middle of fabric. So again, very carefully removing these leafy plants from the bottom of his legs, and cut that space out there as well. Now I think this one's a little more difficult going on here, so we're going to very carefully cut along there. And then along for this, I think it's a crocus. Right, so nearly, his feet are going all over the place there. Right, so this one's a little more awkward, so we're going to crop his feet off, but you may notice here there's a little bit, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to write number 1 here, because that is his leg. Just to remind me that we're going to want to cut that out and lay that on the top later. But then you see it saves us having to try and cut all these different shapes out, so now we've got a much easier shape to cut out. And we're not going to separate the different bits of his body. Her body, his body, I don't know. Right, okay, so on this one we could take off here, just take off this little flower, because it doesn't really matter on the placement. So sometimes I do them together. Right, that's number 8, and I think that's by itself. So we're not going to take off different areas. Oh, I've not labelled his ears, so his ears would be 2. We're not going to take off these different sections here, because we're going to cut the whole thing out in one fabric, because that saves us having, like here, you'd end up with some very thin sections, and they can be difficult to cut and difficult to sew without them kind of wandering around a little, and we'd have to use a fusible, and I hate fusibles. So by layering it up this way, we can eliminate the need for some very thin strips of fabric. Okay, so that's him over there. So let's look at this bit. So this is like a central, it's not kind of obvious when you've only got the one pattern, but this is going to make up a central wreath in the middle of the quilt, because I often do a wreath around the outside, so I thought it would be interesting to do a wreath around the middle. So first off, we'll just do it the easy bits. Now some of these pieces are small, so if there's something that you really think, golly, I can't possibly manage to sew that, so that's piece 3, and that can go. That's 5. I can't possibly sew that. I'd rather embroider it. Then, you know, feel free. So I'm going to just divide this tulip from its stem, from its flower. Right, so these little dark leaves can go. Well, I think they're going to be dark. So that is piece 16. So I'll put them over there. And I think we could just separate that off from there. And that's piece 8, which we had a piece 8 from before, so let's pop them with there. So that's 8 over there, and this is a 12. Have we had a 12? Don't think so. And dividing it up like this as well means that once we've got through this bit, you don't have to cut all the applique in one big session. You could, you know, do like pieces 1 to 5, and then put it away and come back when you're not, you know, so you're not tiring yourself out too much. So I think I'm going to leave this one on here, because it'd be easier with the stem not to cut this one off, otherwise we've got 2 thin pieces of stem and they're already small. So that is piece 4. Can't see anything with that on it yet, so let's put them over there. So just this last section too. And you can keep your scraps of freezer paper for other projects if you want. Right, again, I think I'll cut the head of this tulip off as closely and accurate as I can. I mean, it doesn't matter too much if you accidentally do things like that. Right, 15 is, it's like a jigsaw puzzle. I think there's 17 pieces of fabric, colours of fabric in this one, so it's not as bad as some. So let's chop that off from there. Okay, so that says 14. I think I've done it so all the tulips are pretty much different colours, because I want this to be really rainbowy quilt and not have too much repeating. So there's going to be, it's a good one for scraps. Okay, we've got some little flowers here, number 17. Right, what have we got? We've got a daffodil, or narcissi. Let's take him off. And he is a yellow and an orange, which we've definitely got some yellow and orange already. So I think I'm going to put him with the yellow. So with we'll cut the yellow out first. Right, we got, this is all, this one. Right, we're going to cut off these two dark leaves here and put them with number 16. Right, so this bit here is quite messy. So I think what we're going to do here to aid us is we're going to cut this out all as one big piece. And I'm just going to put this with 14, which is the one of the main leaf colours. Okay. And then that'll try and hold these so they don't waft around so much. So where's 14? There. Okay. Right, so your choices when you're cutting out, you can either be laying them on top of your templates as you go, or you can directly lay them on top of the background. I switch between the two because if you're picking your own fabrics as opposed to doing mine, you're going to need to see how they're looking. So it can be helpful. So if I'd cut this out, I can then lay it on and think, oh, right, that colour, this colour. Oh, that green would look terrible if I cut it out of that. So it's kind of, you know, if you realise you've done it wrong. And sometimes it's helpful to have the template printed not covered up, because then you can see where you're doing this. If you've got it covered up, it's not as obvious of how these layers are building up. You might find it helpful if you want to lay it out over this to print your template out a second time, and then you can lay one out and still see what you're doing. So next we need to start cutting out.